Mac Power Users episode 498, Back to School with Jake Wilson. Hello and welcome back to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett and I'm joined as always by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Hello, Mr. Hackett. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm ready to go back to school.
It's fall, you know. It's not cool yet here, but one day it'll be cool here again. And, you know, the kids are back. Routine is coming back into my life. It's all good stuff.
I'm not sure your kids agree, but okay.
They're not in love with the idea. How were you as a kid? Did you like school as like an elementary school kid?
Mixed. I had a lot of friends and a lot of cool stuff I did at school, but I always was happy. You know, there was something about that first day, or I guess I would say the last day of school, and going home and jumping in the pool and knowing that there was no school. There was something special about that feeling. But I was usually ready to go back by the time it was time to go back.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't have a pool to jump into, but I was always ready to go back. But I was kind of a nerdy kid, not to anyone's surprise.
Yeah, well, you know, I grew up in the suburbs. Our neighbor had a pool.
There you go.
And we had a gate between our backyards, so they could come over our house. My dad put one of those above-ground jacuzzis in at one point, so they'd use our jacuzzi, we'd use their pool, open license. So it was pretty cool.
That's a pretty good setup.
Except I had to do all the work. I had to keep it clean.
Well, you're using it. I mean, it seems fair.
There you
go. So it is now September, so we're kind of wrapping down Relay FM membership month. The MPU membership episode has been up for a little while now. If you haven't heard that, David and I drafted Apple hardware. It was a lot of fun. I had fun going down memory lane and defending picks, and it was a good time. So if you're a Relay FM member, thank you for your support. If you're not, you want to learn more, you can head over to relay.fm/MPU, and in the sidebar, there's a couple membership links, or you can go to relay.fm/membership and learn about all the great perks. But David, you guys did something amazing on Automators. I'm only about halfway through it, but
okay.
Tell me a little bit about what y'all did.
Well, you know, it's just one of those things that grew. When Rose and I were together in Chicago for MacStock, and we got talking about, well, what are we going to do for the member episode? And we're like, well, you know, everybody's doing Lego. I said, let's do a board game. And then, of course, the only board game that makes any sense is Mousetrap for Automators. Mm-hmm. So we started out with the idea that we would do a mousetrap, like probably over video, so we could see each other and like we'd have it somewhere. But then we realized we'd be together in San Francisco for the Relay 5th anniversary. And then Sal Segoyan got involved and his wife Naomi. So we went over to Sal's house and we had enchiladas. And we played Mousetrap with Sal Segoyan. It was quite fun, and it was interesting because the game went down. It's almost like you'll think we rigged it because like the dice rolls were just like there were some dramatic moments in that game, and you couldn't have scripted it better. It was fun.
Yeah. So so you can join Relay FM. A member to any show gets access to all this stuff. So if you support Upgrade, you get MPU and Automators and everything else, or however you want to do it. So. Thank you for your support. It helps keep the lights on around here, and we really appreciate it.
That's not all, though, Stephen. We got other things we're raising money for at Relay.
We are. So September is National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And I know a lot of people know this about me, but maybe some of the MPU audience doesn't. But I've got 3 kids, and my oldest is a brain cancer survivor. He is 11. He's doing really, really well. But that's thanks to the fine work of the men and women at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which is here in Memphis. It's in my own backyard, but it is a world-class institution for kids with catastrophic diseases. And we are working together this year to raise money for St. Jude. We do this every year. Our goal this year is $75,000. Thanks to the generosity of the Relay audience. Last year, we raised just shy of 70, so we feel pretty good about that 75. And the reason this is so important is because St. Jude doesn't charge families of patients anything. We've been sort of a patient family, if you will, now for 10 years. Like hand on heart, I've never received a single bill from St. Jude for anything. And that is only possible thanks to the community of people who raise money for the hospital. And it's really awesome. So you can learn more and you can donate at stjude.org/MPU. We're going to be talking about this throughout the month of September. I'll give a little teaser that Mike and I are going to be co-hosting like a 6-hour live video podcast on September 20th. We'll talk more about that as we get to it. That's to raise money for St. Jude. And I think I want to talk about some of behind the scenes of that, maybe on a future Mac Power Users episode, one of our feedback shows, can talk about sort of what's gone into that. But for now, we would love your support. stjude.org/MPU.
Now, I want you guys to use that MPU URL that we're going to put in the show notes, because I want the MPU community to stand and deliver here. I want to make the other hosts feel bad. Is that okay?
It's not a race, but sure. I'm honestly for that anytime.
All right. I'm putting in a significant donation as soon as we hang up here. So I want to kick it off for MPU. And you know what? If the MPU crowd delivers, I may do another significant donation. So
awesome.
Let's all get in there and contribute. It's such a wonderful cause, and it does make you feel really good when you help something out like St. Jude. They take sick kids and they make them better.
It's pretty awesome.
How do you beat that?
Can't in my book, that's for sure.
All right. Well, thanks everybody in advance for helping out. The MPU audience has traditionally been big supporters of this, and I know in the past you guys have delivered. Please do again. And not only for Josiah, but for all those kids there. And also Stephen undersells himself. I know he's been working on this very hard in the background. It's not just that we're doing this drive together. The Relay Network is the first ever podcast network that has done something like this with St. Jude. We're kind of a test for them, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, we're their first official podcast partnership.
Yeah, and I want them to know that they picked the best for the first. So everybody help out, and I can't wait to see all the good we can do in the next month.
Sounds good to me. All right, so I think it's about time to introduce our guest. Like we said, it's the autumn. School is starting for a lot of people, and that is more than just my kids. It's teachers and principals, and that's where we're going today. So welcome to the show, Jake Wilson.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate that.
So Jake is a school principal. We've had a lot of educators listening to the show over the years. We had a couple on the show, but Jake and I started talking via email and eventually telephone calls, and I realized we got to have this guy on the show. He's doing some pretty cool stuff with his Apple gear.
Well, I'll tell you, it's to me, it's an honor. I've been a fan of you guys since not very long after I made the switch from PC to Apple World, which is a switch I never thought I would have made. But ever since then, I got into podcasts pretty quickly, and you guys were early on my list. Really, it was selfish reasons. I wanted to educate myself, and then it's become just a show I look forward to, every single episode. So good to be here.
Well, thank you. And we've got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about the fact that Jake is not only a principal, he's also a grad student. He's a family man. He's juggling a lot of things at once. Got some pretty cool workflows. And we're gonna talk about meetings, because that's always fun. Everybody deals with meetings. Right. Jacob, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am an elementary school principal. I should say I'm a dad and husband first. Those are my two favorite jobs. I have been married now for 11 years this past summer, so that's pretty exciting times. We have several kids. We actually have adopted all of our kids, and somewhat miraculously, we won't get into this story, but just trust me when I say it's miraculous. We have a kid on the way. Who my wife we are pregnant. And so, awesome. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah. Which is kind of a surprise to find out. And, let's see, I have a 15-year-old who's headed into her freshman year of high school. I have a 14-month-old. And then we had a child, about 2 years ago, who we had adopted. She was born with a pretty rare, genetic heart disorder, and she passed away at 5 months old. So it was about a year. Well, it'll be 2 years in November. And so I like to say we have 3 kids. We have one on the way. We're a big fan of a big family, so I don't think that we're done. We are going to have to buy a different house, because I do not have enough room in this house. So that's become an issue.
I know that pain.
Other than, yeah, it's a tough one. So we're kind of between, like, do we add on to the house? Do we buy a new house? Not 100% sure where we're going with that. So, but we like our neighborhood, so it's a little bit of a tough decision. So, anyway, I am an elementary school principal of a school of about 430 some odd students. We go from pre-K Head Start, which for us is 3-year-olds, which is kind of wild to think about in an elementary school, all the way up to fifth grade students. And so, like I said, all told about 430 kids. For our district, our school district here in North Carolina, that's a little on the average to maybe high average size. A lot of our schools are in that 300 range, so we're a little bit bigger than average, but that's about, it's not our biggest, it's definitely not our smallest, so kind of right there in the middle. I am a full-time graduate student working on my doctorate right now, so I'm I'd say about halfway through that. I've got probably a couple of years left on that. Once you get past all the class stuff, then it's like, now it's time to write your dissertation, and they are happy to take your money as many semesters as you want to continue doing. Well, my hope is to not give them, is to give them the least amount of money. I like where I go to App State, and it's fully online. And so I've been going there, like I said, for a couple of years now. And so I've got a couple of years left, but looking forward to finishing that up. And I recently started this year, actually, a small consulting firm where I do some Google training and leadership training for other school districts. So that way I can kind of charge a little on the side, and it gives me a great excuse to buy Apple gear.
A good friend of mine is in education. He said that the biggest problem with teaching teachers to become Google experts is that they never stay teachers. They realize how well they can do helping set up other schools, that it's actually hard to retain them then.
Absolutely. And there's been some interesting programs. Apple has a program like this. Google has a program, and there's a few others where you can be certified, by Apple or Google, Apple certified teacher, Google certified teacher, and there's some benefits that come with that, and it's works out pretty well on a resume, because you're able to kind of say, look, not only can I teach other teachers, but this is something I can use in my classroom, and it makes a teacher very marketable. I can tell you, as a person who hires teachers, somebody who has that kind of competency around technology is somebody who is very interesting to us.
And because you have so much free time, you're also on some local boards.
That's right. Yeah, I almost forgot. That's good. I'm glad you mentioned that. I mentioned that both of our kids were, all of our kids have been adopted. Two of them have been adopted through Bethany Christian Services, which is it's a nationwide adoption agency, but it's they have branches that are independently run throughout the nation. So we've got a federal, or not a federal, nationwide organization, but also we operate through the North Carolina branch. And so after our second adoption through them, we kind of went a different direction, and but we had such a great relationship that they asked me to serve on the board. So I've never served on the board of anything, so this is a very new experience for me, and I feel like I'm a big grown up now that I'm serving on the board of something, which is really a fancy way of saying you do a lot of work for free. So not sure how I got roped into that, but I'm enjoying it so far. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the second half of serving on the board. The first part is being impressed with yourself. The second part is realizing, oh, wait, I'm doing a lot of work and I'm not getting paid.
I'm not sure how they talked me into this. No, I kid. I do love the folks there, and it is really an honor to help out. And quite honestly, it's not a ton of work. Otherwise, I would have had to have said no. So I'm getting really good at saying no here lately.
Well, I'm listening to it. I'm wondering, when does this guy sleep?
Well, I will tell you this. Now, sleep is something that in my home is really important. We figured out early on, somewhat for me due to like medical reasons, nothing major, but if I don't get enough sleep, I don't feel good at all, and I'll end up sleepwalking, and just it's not it's just not good for my health. So I realized early on as a young adult that I had to get at least 7 a night, and really closer to 8. So
I was just telling somebody recently, when I go to conferences, like if it's like a couple days, it's not a problem. But if it's like a week-long conference, I always build one day in the middle. Like if it's Monday through Friday, I'll usually do it on Wednesday night or Tuesday night. But I'll build in one day where I tell everybody I've got an appointment, and I will go to bed at like 7. just one night.
That's where you go all the time.
Yeah. Everybody's like, I didn't make it to Gruber's thing this year. Wanted to go, but I decided, no, I'm hitting the wall. This is the night. And I was in bed at like 7. And just like one night of a full night's sleep, and then you're good for the next 2 or 3 days.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. We all have countless accounts online, social media, banking, everything in between, and each of those accounts deserves a strong, unique password to keep us safe. And that's where 1Password comes in for me, like it has for so long now. I use it to not only create strong, unique passwords, but to remember them and automatically fill them as well. My passwords are available on all of my devices, so if I'm at home or in the office or somewhere in between, I can log into anything I need to safely. It is back to school season. It's a great time to look at 1Password for families. It's a great way to keep students safe as they maybe go off to college or have their own devices now. It's really easy to get set up. You can set up different vaults so you have logins that only the parents have, say credit card or banking, and then shared things for everyone else in the family. And of course, each student can have their own things there as well. So if they're logging into university email or campus activities, whatever they need to do, you know they can do it safely with 1Password for families. 1Password works across a wide range of browsers, so if they're on a desktop, a notebook, an iPad, an iPhone, Android, Windows, whatever, they can log in with their 1Password items. Head on over to 1password.com/MPU to learn more. Go check out 1Password for families, and you can sign up for a free 30-day trial. When you sign up at 1password.com/MPU, you'll get 20% off. Our thanks to 1Password for supporting Mac Power Users and keeping us safe online. So Jake, let's start with your hardware. So you've got a bunch of things going on, but what Apple gear are you driving?
Okay, so I've had one recent addition. I'll kind of work. Let's do size. I'll go from smallest to biggest. How's that? I'm running for iPhone. I've got a 10x Max. Man, that's a harder thing to say than I realized it was. I'm on the we upgrade every year kind of a plan, and my wife, I feel like she's caught the nerd bug from me, so she is also on that upgrade every year plan. So my daughter recently got a phone. She either gets a hand-me-down or a smaller device, but we like to have kind of the new one each year and play with the new hardware and that kind of thing. So I'm running the 10s Max. I've been a huge fan of the big phones. I've read a couple of rumors where we're looking at even a slightly bigger phone coming out. Who knows? I can pretty much guarantee you I will get the biggest one that Apple makes because I love the big phone. I just huge fan of that. I've been a MacBook Pro.
Just on that real quick, Jake. It's interesting because there's a lot of people that just hate the big phone. But what is it for you that makes it work?
Well, I think it's a combination of stubby fingers,
okay,
and really just home screen and app real estate. To be quite honest with you, I spend a lot of time dealing with text and task management, calendars, those sorts of things, and I want to see as much data on the screen as I can. I can remember the first time I got the excessively large iPhone was when they demoed it at the keynote, and they turned the phone in landscape mode, and the email came up like it did on the iPad. I don't think not every app does that anymore. That may have gone away, and honestly, I didn't use it that way very much. But that was the thing that got me really interested in that device, because to me, being able to interact with the text that's on my phone or the calendar entries or the task list and that kind of thing, to be able to see as much of that stuff on one screen as possible, that is incredibly compelling to me. So for me, it's absolutely about the screen real estate.
Now, do you use that to watch media, or is it just for productivity type stuff?
I will say the general use is productivity. From time to time, if I'm killing a little bit of time, I'll watch some Netflix on there. I generally, to be honest with you, I don't watch a lot of media on my iPhone. It's kind of funny. I'm generally the person who puts my son to bed each night, and it's kind of a little thing that we do. And so I will, as I'm putting him to bed, I generally will watch a little bit of an episode of The Office or something like that on Netflix, and so that's about the only media that I watch. Otherwise, it's mostly productivity. To be honest with you, not a lot, little bit of YouTube here and there, but like I said, just you know, I'd say it's a good 85% it's productivity.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think that big phone is great if you like to get work done on your phone. I mean, it's nice. And I guess Steven, you're kind of the same too, right? No, I'm sorry, you're no longer in the big club, are you?
That's right. Yeah, I had the 10s Max and ended up going back to the 10s. It was too big for me, and I came from the old Plus phones, but the 10s is about the same physical size as the old Plus phones, with all filled in with screen, and that was enough for me. It was just too big for me to comfortably use. So my limit is kind of the 10s, maybe the 10R, and of course, new iPhones are right around the corner, so who knows what will happen. I think there is probably a market for an even bigger phone. Honestly, people really like what you get out of them. But for me, that 10s size is that's about right for me.
Well, when you think about it, the 10s gives you about the same screen real estate as the old big iPhone did, right? I mean, pixel wise, so I can see that.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I hold, like my daughter, she uses the iPhone 7, and it works pretty good for what she does. And it's funny because when I hold it, it feels like I'm holding an iPod Nano. I mean, the thing, it's. I feel like my hand just swallows it. But there is something there. I will admit there is something compelling about holding that small phone and just kind of having. It's almost one of those things. I'd like to use it if I were gonna, not that I do a lot of traveling, but if I, if I were overseas and, just needed something that I could just take with me and not worry about it, I could see using a small device like that in a travel situation. Again, nobody in my family has a need for multiple iPhones for one person, but I could. It's there's something about that small phone, but I can tell you unequivocally, at the end of the day, I'm going back to the big phone. I love my gigantic iPhone.
Are you also a gigantic iPad guy? Did you get the biggest iPad?
Interestingly, no, I didn't, and there's a reason for that. So I guess that's a good segue into the next device, and that right now I'm running an iPad Pro 10.5. So I've been an iPad Pro since the day they came out. This was a device for me that was when I went with the pencil, with the keyboard, like this was a device I was looking for. I was using an iPad Mini for a couple of years, and I kept trying to find applications where I could use handwriting and things like that. That was always really compelling. So when this pencil came out, I knew that this was a device that I was going to really like. So I initially got the 9.7, and in my job, there's our school district, of course, we provides some devices for staff members of varying degrees, and I did actually try out for a time. I was working in a different school, and I tried out the 12.9, and it was a school issued device, and so I decided I'm going to give this a try, really give it a go. So I made it my main iPad device, and honestly, there were a lot of things that were really nice, especially sitting in meetings and things like that. The extra real estate was really good. Here's what I didn't like about it. I did not care for the handwriting on the giant screen. I felt like I was moving my hand way too much. I felt like the 9.7 or the 10.5, that smaller form factor, I was quicker, and so when I was doing handwritten notes, I felt like it was a little bit more along the lines of a typical notepad, and I felt like my note taking was just a little bit more productive, a little bit more. It seemed more natural, I guess is the best way to put it. So after I spent a little bit of time with the 12.9, my wife had commandeered my 9.7. So sadly, when I moved schools, I had to purchase myself a new one. So she kept the 9.7 and I got the 10.5. So I'd on a daily basis fight the temptation to get the 11 inch. It's a compelling device.
Oh, just wait. I feel like we're gonna, we're coming up. It's been long enough. I suspect we'll have some.
I've been thinking the same thing. The fall, I'm very interested to see what happens here in about a month or so.
There's something about that new design, though. I really, really like it.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I've never heard someone say that before. I mean, usually the complaint with the 12.9 is, it feels like a lunch tray and carrying it around is a pain, and even just like holding it in your lap feels too big. But I've never heard the handwriting problem. But I can see how you would think that. It would feel kind of weird writing on a piece of glass that big.
Yeah. See, one of my workflows with this is, we go to church here locally, and I have ever since I was able to take on the iPad, I became really just dedicated to paperless notebooks. I don't have anything against paper. I can see the draw, David. I know you're a big fancy pen, fancy paper guy, and I appreciate that. But I love my digital notes, and so for
Sure.
me, when I went whole hog into finding a good note taking app, I settled with Good Notes. I'm a big fan, and so
That's a good one.
I would. It's a great app. Oh my! And I'm pretty sure I learned about it on this show, but anyway, I take all my sermon notes, that kind of thing. And I just felt like this real weird guy sitting in church with a giant piece of glass on my lap, trying to take my notes. My wife probably made fun of me a little bit about that too. But anyway, so yeah, I went back to the 10.5. I don't think I'll ever go to the big one. To me, that is just, it is the perfect size. And I've held the 11. I like it too. That machine was built for me, I feel like.
Yeah, Steven's the same thing, man. You went 12.9, but then you came down to 11, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My story this year was my iOS devices got smaller, but my laptop got bigger. I kind of get what you're saying, though. There is something kind of nice about the 10.5 or 11, which like footprint wise are very similar, where you can easily hold it in your lap. You could probably even hold it with one hand with the Apple Pencil and be able to use it like a traditional notebook. And in fact, some ways the iPad Mini is maybe the best example of this, where it kind of is the size of a physical notebook. But that makes sense to me, and I think that's kind of what's nice about the iPad range. If you're using it always like a laptop replacement with multiple apps and a keyboard or something like that, yeah, the 12.9 has its upsides. But if you want something a little more compact, Apple makes that too. And I think they're doing a good job at meeting everyone's kind of different needs with the iPad line right now.
I'd say for me too, in my line of work, I spend a lot of time not in my office, and I like that about my job. To be honest with you, I get to be in the building. I spend a lot of time with kids, with teachers, and so for me, having an ultra portable device that allows me to type, that allows me to write, it allows me to type on glass, it allows me to type on the keyboard, and switch between all three of those modes incredibly quickly without a lot of fuss. That's a big win. It's nothing for me to be able to grab my iPad and be handwriting a note in the middle of the hallway, sit down at a table, flip the keyboard out, and start banging out some words, and then turn right around and manipulate the screen with my fingers. And so that to me made the 10.5 or the 11-inch, again, same footprint there, but that to me makes those devices that's why I say it was built for what I do, because it's just the right size.
I have heard lots of people who like to type on glass or who like to write or who like to type. I've heard from very few people that like to do all three. And when we get to workflows later, I want to hear about that and how you jump between those two. But first, I want to hear about your Macs.
Got it. Okay, so I have two MacBook setups. So my first MacBook that I ever bought was a MacBook Pro back in 2012. This was my first foray into the Mac line. I was a Dell person, through and through. I was kind of a dedicated fanboy for a little while. That was my first computer ever that I purchased with my own money, was a Dell. We had some Tandies when I was a kid, but anyway, so I was a big Dell fan, and I'd had a couple of years where, I'd bought them, and 6 months later, they were bricks. They just weren't holding up. So I kind of got fed up. And at the time, I had an iPad Mini, which I liked. I had gotten an iPhone, which I liked, and I had started grad school to become a principal. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to get me a new computer. And so I ended up getting the MacBook Pro. I think I did the 500 gigabyte spinning drive, and upgraded the RAM a little bit. And man, I tell you, never ever looked back. So that one was actually still working up until about a year ago, and it had slowed down to an unbearable level. I use an iPad, I'm sorry, a MacBook Air at school. It's my school issued device, and that for a while was my main device. I was using it, I was taking it back and forth to work. I was using it at home. I was using it at work, and really it was holding up well. It was really a workhorse for me. But I had started to notice I was hitting the top end of those limitations. If I was doing really any video work, if I was working with very large spreadsheets, which I do from time to time, I was hitting the end of the I don't know if the CPU is just maxing out, man, and so I knew I needed something with a little bit more power. So when I began my consulting business earlier this year, I purchased a MacBook Pro, and I had been eyeballing the Pros for a while. Well, they did the I guess it was a small update earlier this year, and I ended up that was right after they changed. They say they updated the keyboard.
Right.
I don't know what they did different with the keyboard. I just know it was updated.
Is that working okay for you?
Honestly, I've had no problems, and quite frankly, I type pretty fast on it. Now that's not to say that it won't mess up in 2 months from now, but I've had no issues whatsoever. I really have enjoyed it. I'll tell you, my only complaint is the arrow keys. That up and down business is not my. I'm not a fan of that. Other than that, key travel, the speed of typing, and I write a lot of papers. So those kinds of things, I have no complaints. I actually really have enjoyed it. And I use now at work. So I use a couple of different setups with both of my Macs. My one at work, my MacBook Air has become a very stationary device, and it's at my desk. And I'll send you a picture of my setup. But basically, I'm running a MacBook Air with two external monitors.
I didn't know they could drive two.
Yeah, so you have to do some funky things to drive to. I had been driving an extra one for a while, and I really like external monitors.
Yeah, so Steven, he has three. Yeah,
that's not true.
It makes me jealous.
Oh, is it four now, Steven?
No, come on. Don't deflect, David. You're the external display guy. I can't live that lifestyle.
Oh man, I have been a fan for a while now. Well, so what happened was I was needing. Listen, nobody needs it, but we'll just say I needed it. I needed an additional monitor, for some reference material and things like that. And so I went on this kind of little bit of a quest to see if I could do it. Everything I read said no. Well, I found this obscure article about an adapter made by DisplayPort. That's the name of the company. And I'll send you a link to what I bought because it has worked like a champ. I've had about a 3-month period where it broke. Apple updated the software. DisplayPort didn't keep up. I know, crazy. Yeah. So about 3 months, I was back down to one. So that was frustrating. But then once that was done, they did a patch, and I was able to fix it, and we were good to go again. And so this company makes this little adapter that what you have to do is from the back of the monitor run an HDMI cable to this adapter. It changes HDMI over to USB. And for this is really kind of janky. I'm going to be honest. When you turn on the computer for about 5 minutes, the monitor it's got some lines in it, so it's a little bit strange. Okay,
how are you living this way, man? Come on.
Here's the way I live there, because I turn the computer on and I go make my coffee at school, and by the time I get back, we're good. It's the lines have gone away. It looks clear. There's no lag in the mouse. It's in the cursor. It's good to go. But I will tell you, it is not the most elegant of setups. It looks beautiful. I'm pretty sure my MacBook Air is it's struggling to keep up with these two monitors, but it does the trick. So
anyway. Is the device just a converter from HDMI to USB? There's not a video card or anything in there?
There must be something in there, because it is a box, and it's you plug in the USB on one end, and I'm sorry, the HDMI on one end, and there's a USB on the other end. Here's the frustrating part. There is a driver, so you have to go to DisplayPort's website. You have to download this driver. You have to install the driver. Use the driver to. It does some magic. Honestly, I don't understand it. It's above my intellect, and so I don't even get into it. I just know that when I plug that thing up, it works. And so
after coffee,
after coffee, it's got to warm up for 5 minutes. But it's kind of like I compare it to a little bit like as a kid, my mom drove this Ford Escort diesel, and in the wintertime, you'd have to go crank this diesel up, and you'd have to let it sit for honestly 20 minutes, because if you didn't, it just wasn't going to go. You had to crank it up, and it'd have to warm up for 20 minutes. Otherwise, you could hit the gas, but it's not going to go anywhere. So
kind of like me.
Yeah, there you go. You gotta get warmed up in the morning. So that's my Air. That's my stationary. It stays on my desk. That's what I work from when I'm sitting at my desk. When I'm away from my desk, I generally have my iPad with me anywhere I go. I have sort of customized this. In schools, we have these things called multimedia carts. I'm sure you remember them, but you may not know what that means. It's essentially these metal carts that a lot of teachers would put things like projectors on, or
Yeah.
document cameras, things like that. So I found one that was just the right height for a standing desk. But the great thing is, of course, is it has wheels. So I feel like a real boss because it's a good, foot and a half deep, 2 foot wide, and I can wheel around the whole school with my MacBook Pro sitting up on top of there. I've got my iPad on the second shelf. I can grab that, and so it's great because basically I have a mobile office. I can go anywhere in the building. I can work in the hallways. I can park in the cafeteria and do a little work, and so it lets me be super mobile, but I can still use the full power of my MacBook Pro. But I can get anywhere in the building, so it's great.
Half standing desk will travel.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I'll tell you, it's a win with my staff because, first of all, I don't like being in the office, but it is. I will say it's. My staff have been very receptive of the fact that I'm available. I mean, I'm around in the building, and if they need me, I'm usually not more than
Yeah.
a hallway away. So yeah, it's worked out nicely.
Yeah, it seems like part of a good principal's job is to have the back of his teachers, and you're actually in the room.
That's correct. Yeah.
So tell me one thing on this MacBook Pro, because you got the new one. What are you doing with the touch bar, if anything?
Okay, so far, I've always been really compelled by the touch bar. I know some people are not big fans of this, but I have enjoyed it. I tell you, the probably the use that gets more, the thing that gets more use than anything else has been the emoji picker, to be honest with you. But what I do, and of course, volume, because you don't have any other choice. But what I do like about it, I've used the Better Touch tool has a custom. You can build custom buttons in this thing, and so
Yes.
I've just gotten into that, and I have found one that I use a ton. I do a lot of. I didn't realize this in my job, but until I built this. But after I built it, I've realized this is great. I use a custom button tool, and it stays, right on my touch bar. It's a Better Touch tool is one that just lives up there, and so when I click that, it gives me this custom button to where if with my cursor, if I have selected a file in the Finder, I press this button, and it automatically grabs the file. It opens up an airmail message. That's my email client that I typically use. Opens up airmail. It attaches it and then puts the cursor right in the to bar so I can, type whoever it's to and send off an attachment. Really great solution.
Is that an Apple script, or how are you doing that?
It is. Let me pull up Touch Bar. Probably not, because I'm not really good at that. I've never really gotten into it, even though I think I would really enjoy it. Let me see if I can.
Is that just one of the Better Touch tool scripts? I mean, they have scripts in there. Yeah.
I'm sure that's what it is, because I can tell you I did no amount of coding for that to work. So it cannot be something that's super complicated. That's something I've always wanted to do more with is Apple scripts. I've just never had the time to get into it. So,
well, when you're not getting your doctorate and raising all your kids and running your school, maybe you can get on that, man.
I'll put it on my tinker list. I keep it on.
Yeah.
Better Touch tool is one of those utilities that really, I think, deserves to be in the same conversation as something like Keyboard Maestro or Automator or anything else on the Mac, because it does give you the ability to jump through a bunch of hoops with a single press if you spend the time to get it set up. And I think it can be a little intimidating to get into it, but like you said, it comes with a lot of stuff out of the box to start tinkering with. And if you've got a touch bar Mac, and if you're like me, you're not super enthusiastic about the touch bar, I think this is worth a download, because you may be surprised what you can get this thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, even just like you can have it display the time all the time right there for you, or your calendar, your next appointment. It is a great utility for the touch bar. And
100%.
And if you're a set app subscriber, you get it for free. So, I mean, there's just a lot of different ways to get into that app.
Well, and that's how I ended up getting into this tool is through SetApp. SetApp was something I had heard mentioned several times, and I just never really thought about pulling the trigger until I ended up. I don't know if they had a free trial or if I just ended up paying for it. But anyway, I went with this and I started downloading a couple of things, and I thought, oh my gosh, so many of these great little. Some of them are single use, but some of them are things like Better Touch Tool, where there's hundreds of things I can do with this thing, and I don't have many here, but the three or four that I've got set up are ones that I really use. I have kind of learned my lesson in terms of tinkering with this stuff. I used to get into these applications, and I'd sit on a Saturday and make 27 of these things, and I'd use maybe two. And so I've sort of learned my lesson over the years to really what I end up doing now is I think, okay, I have a thing that I keep doing over and over and over again on my Mac. And when I notice that, I go looking for a tool that will help me solve that problem quickly. And that has been a much better solution.
Yeah. Or you could buy a 32 button Stream Deck like me and spend a bunch of time reconfiguring your buttons. I mean, it's all a choice,
It is. Once I'm done raising kids in grad school, I think that's where I'll probably head.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is sponsored by Omni Outliner. The latest version of Omni Outliner for the Mac, iPad, and iPhone is a great example of just how much the gang at the Omni Group cares about making the best productivity software. This outlining app is so much more than just a beautiful outliner. It's got automation, distraction-free mode, filters, slide-in sidebars, gorgeous styles, and more. Often people throw seemingly random bits of information at me. In those cases, it's my job to organize it, make sense of it, and then make that information work for my client. This is where, for me, Omni Outliner is essential. It makes order from chaos. I often share these outlines with clients so that we can collaborate on getting things right, and they always love them. They love the way it organizes complex information. They also love the way they look. To an extent, I view Omni Outliner's gorgeous looking outlines as just one more thing that distinguishes me from others in my field. But don't forget, at the bottom, Omni Outliner is a powerful outliner. It's both pretty and powerful. Best of all, with their new Pro and Essentials versions, it's priced so that anyone can have the best outliner available for Mac, iPad, and iPhone. So head over to Omni Group today and give it a spin, and let them know you heard about it here on the Mac Power Users. Jake, we were talking on the phone about all the stuff you do as a principal, and it's really, truly impressive. I mean, you do spend a lot of your day moving around talking to your kids and your teachers, but you also run a full administrative load at the same time. Maybe we should start with just the iPad and how you're using that to help you get through your day.
Sure. No, I think that's great. The iPad has really become. It was one of those devices that I immediately fell in love with, and again, I mentioned, my first iPad was a Mini, and I love the form factor of the Mini. But once the Pro came out, all bets were off. I'm a Pro fan and I'll, that'll be a device that I use for years and years and years. I can tell you that. And so for me, just kind of looking, through my home screen apps on my Pro, a lot of it has to do with schoolwork. It's there are a couple of personal apps. I keep Amazon pretty close because we use that for a lot of shopping, but a lot of my stuff on my home screen, it's definitely school related. But there's also a few that are not specific to schools that I'm using quite a bit. One of those, of course, I mentioned is GoodNotes. That's one if I'm in any kind of meeting where the notes are for me and me only, then I'm hanging out in GoodNotes.
Could you explain that a little further? I mean, like what?
Yeah.
Do you have a template used? I mean, how do you use GoodNotes to take those notes?
Sure. So, so in meetings, whether that's at school, I mentioned, I take my sermon notes on GoodNotes as well. But essentially, what happens is if I'm, we do a lot of training in the school setting, and so if it's training that I'm receiving, I generally have a pretty well organized folder structure within GoodNotes. So. As soon as I open up GoodNotes, my opening documents, everything is sort of laid out in folders. I do have an archive folder that I keep old documents in, but then from there, it's broken down into my personal stuff, my professional stuff, and then each one of those kind of go into a deeper folder structure. So at the school level, I've basically used this as as a personal version of even field notes, where I have a general notebook that is my ongoing field notes. And so I'm sitting in meetings that may take the form of some doodles here and there, some just kind of personal reflections and notes and that kind of thing. What I have found, though, honestly, over the past really couple of years, I've really become a huge fan of plain text notes, and I never really understood for a long time. I never really understood the value of something like Ulysses or drafts until I began to kind of take a look at Markdown and the value of something like that. So really, I'd say these days a lot more of my notes are happening in drafts or Ulysses. Drafts are that's my one-off. That's probably my most used app on my both my iPhone and my iPad. I spend time in drafts just. I mean, all the time. During the day, this morning I started out with 2 notes. I now have 26. And it just fills up all day long, and it could be anything from random thoughts that I may have, and I just want to record those thoughts, to a teacher who says, hey, I need a work order for the air conditioner's not working in my classroom, so I'm putting that kind of stuff in, and just all kinds of things. I've gotten pretty good lately of writing in Markdown, and I find that does really good when I go from drafts to an email. So I use a custom, and I can send this to you, David, but I use a custom drafts action that I probably stole from the what do they call that? The actions directory, I guess is what it's called.
Sure.
So I've used that. I've got a whole folder with some markdown actions, and it's anything from. I'll give you a great example of that. One of those is a full staff email. So one of the drawbacks I've noticed on the iPad. And I don't think this is an Apple problem. I honestly find it to be a Google problem. So we're a school that we're in Google Apps for Education, and one of the benefits of that is that everybody in our network has a searchable email address. So I can just start typing somebody's name, and if I'm on the MacBook, their name just pops up. Well, that does not translate over to the iPad in any app that I've found. Now, if I've emailed them before, it'll pop up. But if it's somebody that I've never emailed before, it doesn't just search the directory. So what I've done is I've created a few groups, and so for me, one of my most used groups is my staff group. So, for example, if I'm sending a full staff email, I've got a markdown action that basically grabs the contents of the drafts. It takes the first line and makes that your subject, and then the rest of it is in the body. It puts it in, goes from markdown to I guess in HTML, and then it sends it to a group that I've already put in there. Now I keep that group updated through a process of a shortcut. So throughout the year, I may hire anywhere from 2 to half a dozen staff members. Things happen, people take other jobs, what have you. And so as I'm hiring those people, anytime I hire a person, I have a shortcut. So once I've hired that person, I hit that shortcut. That shortcut creates about 4 OmniFocus tasks that go through the different places where I have those email addresses stored. I've got them in MailChimp. I've got them in my Google contacts list, and I've got them on drafts. So I go open up drafts, I open up that custom action, and I add their email address in there. So that way, when I send a full staff email, I don't have to search for every list, and I don't have to worry about I don't have my groups on my iPad. I can just go right into drafts. I can compose the whole email in drafts, hit the button, send it off, and it's done. And so, every time I do it, I get this weird sense because no one knows the amount of work that goes behind that. So anyway, all that complicated. So,
but you're working around a limitation in iOS that it doesn't pull,
that's right,
those directories and stuff from Google. That seems like a weird oversight to me since the Mac does it. Hopefully iOS will get its act together for you.
and I don't know that I'm convinced that it's an iOS problem or if it's a, but I can't find a single email app that does this. What happens is you go to contacts.google.com. If you work in a system or if you use Google Apps, right, the G Suite apps, then you can create these custom groups, right? And that's great. So I can have a group for, let's say, third grade, and I just want to email my third grade teachers. Well, that's great as long as I'm working in the web client of Gmail. But as soon as I go over to the iPad, there I can't find a single thing that pulls that group reliably across. Airmail does it a little bit, but it's just not consistent. So anyway,
Yeah, it's always the problem, right, with airmail.
correct.
The
Yes, it is the problem with Airmail.
I was having trouble. I was trying to use airmail seriously last year for a little while, and I found that it didn't. It was did a very poor job of finding my contacts when I would type a subject line. Where if I was an Apple Mail, it would always find them. But I agree with you. I think there's something there that isn't really solved yet, and I'm sure Apple has some responsibility too. It seems like that should be, maybe it should be a common database or a contacts database access. I don't know what the issue is, but there is something to that, because on the Mac it's never an issue, and on iOS it often is. One of the things you had said earlier was, you do a lot of handwritten notes with GoodNotes, but you use drafts. I think, did you say you had over 20 drafts just today?
Yeah. Just kind of looking at those, like I said, I started out with, I generally try to clean those out, every couple of days. If I don't get them there, definitely on my weekly review. But it's things just looking through here. I've got a lot of it is task oriented.
Yeah.
I've got, you're just kind of looking through. I've got send a press release to the local paper. We've got an event coming up. I've got to change over one of our fax lines to a long distance. So that's a task. I mean, it's stuff that mostly isn't urgent, but it's stuff that I just need to get done, and so it goes in on my drafts list, and that's where we go from it. So
and that's like triage for you, basically.
Absolutely. I treat my drafts list a lot like I do my email list. So, as I'm looking through it, I do the old, David Allen thing where it's like, okay, can I do this in 2 minutes? Great, do it. If not, it goes into my task list. If it's information, it goes into reference in Evernote, and or it's trash, And so like I'm brutal, and I go through it, and I can, I'll sit here after we get done recording, and I'll run through this in probably about 15 minutes, and I'll have the whole thing down to zero. So it honestly, it's to me, it's a wonderful collection tool, but it's an even better tool for sending text. And I know this is the developer's whole purpose, is sending text where it belongs. I never realized what the fact that so much of what I do starts out as text, and then I go and do something with that text. I didn't realize how much that was true until I started using drafts, and then I'm amazed by how often I start in drafts.
Do you have the Drafts app on your Apple Watch?
I do, and I do use it from time to time. I don't want to say this too loud because my wife might be getting mad at me for buying an Apple Watch in the beginning. I like my Apple Watch, but I got to be honest with you, I don't use it a ton. I mean, obviously I use it to tell time all the time, and then I wear it every day, and of course, just a little bit of fitness tracking here and there. But the truth about it is it's I've got my phone in my pocket all the time, and so that usually comes out. I will tell you, the getting the alerts on my wrist, that was a game changer from day one.
Yeah, that's I would, the reason I say is because I think a lot of the third-party apps are, the developers biting off more than they can chew with that little screen, but Drafts is like the poster child of a watch app. I mean, it is, in my opinion, probably the most useful complication, because all it is a button. You tap it and you talk to your watch, and then when you get back to your phone or your computer or wherever you see Drafts, it's added, and it's like the perfect example of a good watch app in that sense.
Well, and I'll say Drafts too. When Drafts went over to its subscription model, and we were able to kind of play nice with shortcuts when workflow went to shortcuts. That was a huge piece for me, because when I'm able to sort of automate some of this, it becomes an even bigger deal, because the thing is now being able to run an action from a shortcut and not even have to go into drafts to swipe to the right, swipe to the left, pick the action, do all the thing. I can make my shortcut do the action. Man, that's a beautiful thing. It's wonderful.
Could you give us an example of that?
I use we have as a principal, one of my responsibilities is to have some meetings with a particular group of students in our school. So one group of those students are students with individualized education plans. Okay, so IEPs. We love our acronyms in education. And so one of my responsibilities is to ensure that those meetings are that they follow certain laws, and that everybody is is doing what they're supposed to do within those meetings. So I attend every single one, and there's generally anywhere from 2 to 5, maybe half a dozen in a week. That's about the average number. So this is a great area of my work life to use a shortcut, and of course then a draft. So what I'll do is I'll open up drafts when I get in there. I'm usually doing this, by the way, on an iPad. So I could do it on the phone, but it's definitely not the tool for the job. So open up drafts on my iPad, and I hit IEP minutes. So IEP is individualized education plan. So I'll hit IEP minutes, and when I do that, it pops up with it's going to ask the purpose of today's meeting. Any of those meetings have defined purposes. Then it asks me the child's name. And these are all questions that are being asked in the Shortcuts app. So
Sure.
then it asks me the family members present. So we have to list that we've got the family members in there. And then it's going to ask me who the teacher is. So we list the teacher. And then I get a list to pick from where I can add some additional folks. So in a school, you have, school psychologists, you have speech pathologists, behavior liaisons, occupational therapists, all kinds of related services that you may have to add. So it asked me to check the ones that I want to, so I can check, all of them or just a couple of them. And then I press OK. And then it creates an OmniFocus task for me to send these minutes to our lead EC teacher. Okay. So then it takes all that data that it asked me, and it puts it into an IEP. It puts it into a drafts. And then it allows me to have the, I've got space to do the notes and all that kind of thing. So I type the minutes as we go through the meeting, and then I have an automatic action an action in the right-hand panel where I send that off as a markdown message, because of course I've had it pasted into drafts as markdown. And so then the outcome of that is when I send the markdown, email message, I send that to my EC teacher, and it just looks great. It's formatted in Markdown. It's got headings. It's got all the people who are present. It just is a terrific looking set of notes that, honestly, a lot of it I didn't type. It was check boxes and lists and things like that. So I do that a couple of different ways. If it's a pretty standard meeting where the minutes aren't really all that detailed, because sometimes we have some of those meetings, then I've had Shortcuts ask me whether I want to automatically send the automatically run the draft. And so if I click yes, then it goes through, if yes, do this. So it runs through the automatic draft, it does the action in drafts. So it pastes the information in drafts, then it goes ahead and runs a markdown message, and I send it off. If it's something I've got to type some more notes, then I'll say no, and it just pastes the information into a draft, and then, off I go typing, and then I'll do the action myself. So that's a pretty good example of using automatic actions in drafts. I've been a big fan of that one.
Yeah, and the reason you probably have to do that is because there is an email action in Shortcuts, but there's no rich text. So the advantage of getting it through drafts is you're able to send it off as a rich text message, which looks a lot better.
Absolutely. And I've been tinkering with one where, because I honestly like using PDFs for this purpose even more so than I do in an email. Email is fine. And in terms of, doing my job and doing it to the letter of the law, email is totally acceptable. But there's just something that seems more official about using a PDF. So I've been working on a draft that will do that will take that information.
Less editable.
Yes, very much so. And so anyway, I've been working on, a situation where I can do it that way. Builds a PDF, then sends the PDF as an attachment. And anyway, it'll do the exact same thing, but that's kind of the gist of that.
One of the fun things about shortcuts, though, is once you figure out, like the thing you described for me, where you go to a meeting, you take notes, then it does something to automatically send them off. That is a skill once you have that you can apply to all sorts of different scenarios. So I'm guessing once you build one, you just duplicate it and make small changes to make it work.
Absolutely. And I've, in terms of one of the things I found when we were dealing with workflow, I was a slow sign on with workflow. But then once they're toward the end, and then once we were acquired by Apple and we changed over to shortcuts, I went in whole hog. And one of the challenges I found was the sheer number of workflows that I had. And so dealing with that became a real issue because I love the widget screen and being able to see my workflows from that. But of course I couldn't fit all of them in there, nor did I want to fit all of them in there. I have, hundreds. What I found was this, and I don't know where I heard this from, but I definitely stole this idea. First thing I do is I color code. So if it's work task related, it's a certain color and that kind of thing. The other thing I did was at the beginning of each color category, I've created a shortcut that leads to other shortcuts. So to give you a great example of that.
Nested shortcuts. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So to give you a good example of that, I use I have work task workflows. And so I just have work WFS. So that stands for workflows. And then inside that shortcut, basically I have choose from menu. And then each menu item is the title of a shortcut. And then inside that menu item for each one, I just do the run shortcut.
Yeah.
And then I make sure that I'm running the right one. So the only one I include in the widget is that first workflow. So from my home screen, swipe over, looking at the shortcuts list, type workflows, and it gives me my whole list of ones. I can scroll through that and pick the one that I want.
Yeah, I've got a video walking you through how to do that in the new Shortcuts Field guide that's going to come out with iOS 13, because that is even more relevant now, because once you get iOS 13 loaded, you'll be able to have those shortcuts on your desktop at all times because you can display two widgets on the left side. So what I have done is I just have those triggering shortcuts always on the screen on my iPad and getting to them. And when the real like ninja level to this is shortcuts of shortcuts. So you have multiple levels. Like for me as a lawyer, I have the legal one, then I have the corporate forms, and I have the LLC forms, and they're different sets. It's like a separate shortcut. So like there's another nested shortcut inside the nested shortcut. Sounds crazy, but when you start using it, it actually makes it very fast.
I'm just sitting here thinking about how far we've come with automating content. This is really, you're taking these meeting notes that maybe you used to write in a form, but you're automating them to make them smoother. And this post I wrote in like 2011 popped in my head where I made a PDF to do some of this, just like make all my meeting notes look the same. And then over time, it became a text expander snippet. And now if I still had a need for this, it would definitely be a shortcut. It's a great way to get like structured text into something. Like I said, you can email it or share it out. There's no need to handwrite stuff over and over. That's no fun.
I think the next time you have a meeting with Mike Hurley, you should have a shortcut that sends him a PDF at the end.
I think he would. I think he'd love that.
Yeah, I think he would too.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Linode. With Linode, you can instantly deploy and manage an SSD-powered server in the Linode cloud, and you can get it up and running in just seconds with your choice of Linux distro, resources, and node location. It doesn't matter if you're working on your first server or deploying a complex system, Linode are the folk to go to. They offer the fastest hardware and networking with outstanding customer support if you ever need any help. And again, it's super easy to launch in the Linode cloud server. Their block storage is available in Newark, Fremont, Dallas, Atlanta, Frankfurt, London, and Singapore, and soon to be released in Tokyo as well. And version 4 of Linode's RESTful API is out of beta and includes officially supported Python CLI. And right now, Linode is hiring. If you want to learn more and check out what they're looking for, just go to linode.com/careers. We've been using Linode at Relay for years to host our advertising tracking system where, for instance, this ad copy is hosted, and it's been super easy to work with over the years to make upgrades and changes, and their support really is out of this world. Linode has pricing options to suit everyone. Their plans start at just 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month, and they offer high memory plans starting at 16 gigs of RAM. And Linode has a special offer. As a listener of Mac Power Users, you can go over to linode.com/MPU and use the promo code MPU2019 to get $20 towards any Linode plan. On the 1 gig of RAM plan, that's 4 free months. And with a 7-day money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose. Give Linode a try today. That's linode.com/MPU and the promo code MPU2019 to learn more, sign up, and make the most of that $20 credit. My thanks to Linode for their support of Mac Power Users. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the classrooms themselves. And I'm really curious sort of what the state of technology is in the classrooms that you oversee as principal. I know in my elementary school that my kids are in, there's actually not a lot of tech, less than I sort of expected. And I'm curious to know where y'all are with that and, how that's been, if there is tech there. What's that like to oversee as a principal? How do you juggle managing, things like screen time and expectations when it comes to kids and technology?
One of the benefits of being an elementary school principal is, we have an exceptional amount of control over the screen time of our students. I think the older that our students are getting, the more that schools have realized they're fighting a losing battle when it comes to trying to keep tech out of a student's hand. And I think there are legitimate reasons to keep technology out of a student's hands from time to time. It depends on what you're doing in the classroom. At an elementary school, we're in this nice sweet spot because kids love to use tech. And so anytime you're bringing technology into a lesson, you sort of automatically have kids' attention, and it becomes a great sort of opener to say, back when I was a kid, when you walked in the classroom and you see the TV sitting on the cart, you knew it was going to be a great day. Well, the difference now is kids come in, they see the Chromebook cart and or the stack of iPads on the side, and they know, okay, we're going to be using some technology today. So you automatically have some excitement level there. So in our typical classroom, this is true really K to 5. So we're a smart board district. Our district does provide principals a bit of freedom in the terms of technology that they buy. However, and I think this is a really smart way that our IT department has done this. What IT will say is you can buy whatever you want to buy as a principal. You're the boss. You decide how you spend your money. But we're only going to work on this brand. So it's kind of like you can buy it if you want to, but if it goes wrong, you better have bought this particular brand. And they do that because there's just no way that that department could keep up with every single piece of technology. So, right. So those brands for us are, in terms of, classroom displays. So interactive displays is really the category there. Our district is a smart board district. So if you're familiar with smart technologies, it's a educational suite of software and hardware. They make the interactive display panels. And now they're up to like the 8,000 series, but everything after 6,000 was it used to be that you had to pair a projector with a smart board. And what happened was you had this big white screen, and when you pressed your finger on the white screen, there was an electrode on the back of it that touched a sensor that you couldn't see. And then that meant that's where the cursor was going to be. So you could do a lot with that. You could have pencil or pens that you could write with on the, and then whatever you did on the screen, then that was then projected on top of what you were writing. So that was sort of the magic of the smartboard originally. Well, what that has turned into are these basically gigantic TVs. So the 6,000 series uses these 60-inch television screens with a kind of an overlay on top of those. So those become interactive. So kids can write on them at the same time. You can change colors. You have some basic whiteboard space on there, but you can also bring up any website, any PDF copy of anything, and you can write right on it. So the interactive displays, that we have one of those in every single classroom. So for teachers, all of our teachers are issued MacBook Airs, and that includes our support staff and things like that. So all of those folks have MacBook Airs. Our students use a combination of Chromebooks and iPads. And so those are the devices that IT says, yeah, we'll work on those. We'll fix those if problems come up. So we use a particular brand of Chromebook. I honestly don't remember what the brand is, but it's reasonably priced. They work really well. They last for a good 3 to 4 years. And then, we kind of have a rolling schedule of replacing those devices. Now at the high school level, so from 12th grade down to 6th grade, our district is 1-to-1, which means all of our students are issued a device at the beginning of the year, and they keep up with that device throughout the entire year. And at the elementary level, we are not at an official 1-to-1 level. And I'll be honest with you, we have not found that to really hold us back. I think when the idea of going 1-to-1 came around, it was this, you kind of had to go all or nothing. Everybody, it was really popular to say, oh yeah, our school or our school district is 1-to-1. But I'd say in an elementary school, we have found that as long as we have about a class set for each grade level, which means it's usually about 30 devices, for a grade level. So our 5th grade, we've got, 75 kids, 77 kids. They have 30 devices for the grade level. And we have absolutely no problem whatsoever sharing those devices. We never have any overlap. We never have any staff who, they have a lesson that involves a Chromebook and they can't get a hold of a Chromebook. We have enough. It's funny because there's this interesting transition at about the 2nd grade age where the kids like iPads, but they also like the Chromebooks. And so we've tried to find the nice transition time around that age to where, okay, the iPads are useful, but we also need to train kids how to use a keyboard and how to use a trackpad and how to use, how to navigate Google and those kinds of things. So that's been an interesting challenge as a principal to find the right device for the right age. Kindergarten, 1st grade is really easy. 4th grade, 5th grade, really easy. That 2nd to 3rd grade age, it's kind of a combination of iPads and Chromebooks. And so finding that sweet spot has been an interesting challenge. And then, of course, when things go wrong, it does not hurt that my school has a very nerdy guy as their principal, because we can troubleshoot things a lot without having to put them into technology work orders and things like that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I'm curious about the smart board and the integration with the Macs and iPads that the staff are using. Is that something where the Macs see them as an external display, or are they sort of a silo to themselves?
No, they do. You can do a couple of different things. So you can definitely hardwire those in, and that just is, it's an HDMI cable into your MacBook. So our whole school lives in Dongle Town, and because no Mac has a HDMI input. So for the Airs, that means you're using the HDMI to, what is that, Thunderbolt, I guess. Adapter. And so anytime we buy a smart board, we go ahead and buy that dongle as well. And it just is kind of standard operating procedure. So, but yeah, so you plug in, it sees it as an external display. Now that gives you the video. What happens though, is you're also going to need the touch interaction with the smartboard, because the beauty of a smartboard is that kids can now get up out of their seat and they can interact with that technology, using a digital pen, using their finger, their whole hand. There's a couple different gestures that go along with that. And so to connect the touch interaction, it's a simple USB connection. So you're basically plugging two things in. You're plugging in a USB, which controls your touch. You're plugging in a HDMI through Thunderbolt adapter to do the video. Now, recently with this particular series and the newer ones, they have the functionality where you can AirPlay to the device. Now, it's doesn't have an Apple TV in there, but it does have AirPlay capabilities. It also additionally has Chromecast capabilities as well. So you essentially can take your MacBook and you can be anywhere in the classroom and you can display what's on your computer on that screen. Now, of course, you lose the touch capability. So if you're airplaying, the touch does nothing. You go up and touch the screen, it does nothing. But if all you're doing is displaying some data, some piece of information, or a Google Slides presentation, or something like that, it's a terrific feature. Of course, with AirPlay, that airplays your audio across there as well, and so you've got audio and video coming across the air, and that has been for our teachers who've discovered it, or who we've shown that feature, that it's a freeing thing. That it used to be you had to be right there next to your smartboard. Your computer was sort of tied to that smartboard. Well, now you can be anywhere in the classroom. You can go sit next to a particular student, or you can be at the back of the room teaching, and it has changed the way that we approach the actual teaching part of education, I think.
As a parent, I go to back to school night and I see these really cool looking smart boards, and I totally want to get up and like start playing with them. But then the teachers, then they put the slides on, the back to school slides. It's Comic Sans, and it's like 1,000
No.
words per page, and my heart just breaks. I'm like, what are they doing with this stuff?
It is a little heartbreaking when you run into a classroom and the only thing that you're seeing is just the display of information, because you have a really cool piece of technology that is just right there at your fingertips, that really, it's a shame that, I tell you, I almost want to look at a teacher who does that and say, listen, let's just get you an Apple TV and a 55-inch television, and we'll just put it in here, because that's what you're using it as. And I don't mean to be ugly or anything like that, but if all you want is to project it, listen, we can find something much cheaper than a $3,000 piece of technology.
Right.
What it comes down to is, as a principal, and this is one of my challenges, I've got to make sure my teachers, they have the most updated technology. But the other part of my responsibility is to make sure that they know how to use it. And so, I look at that as when I walk into a classroom and that's what I see, my first response to that is, as the administrator, I think, okay, what more can we do as an administrative team to support our teachers to make sure they have the training in place? Because look, we're not dealing with stupid people. Teachers are very hardworking human beings, and usually they're very intelligent people. And so, I know that they know how to do a lot of things, but a lot of things they don't know how to do, and they just haven't been trained. And so, instead of getting frustrated with that, what I try to do is to make sure that they have the tools at their fingertips to be able to do that. The way I approach that, of course, is to say, listen, I noticed you doing something, whatever it is in your classroom. Is there a way that I can, make that more efficient, or essentially look very appealing to that teacher? If I can make a piece of technology, or something fancy, do make their job easier, then I have got their attention. And once I've done that, then we can make some real moves in the field of using technology in the classroom.
Nobody uses this stuff but education. I just rarely see it anywhere else. I'm just kind of, I wonder sometimes why this stuff hasn't taken off more in private industry.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because one of the things we talk about in education, and this is true really K to 12, is we as teachers, we see ourselves as sort of trainers of the future. We're training kids to interact in a future that doesn't even exist yet. One of the mantras that we keep fresh on our mind is, our kids will have jobs that have not been invented yet. They're going to have roles in our society that don't even exist, and so we're preparing them for something that we have very little ideas about. And so, and sometimes we get it right. Sometimes we, look, the use of computers in a classroom, giving kids experience, that is the right way to go, because you can't have a job now that doesn't involve some level of computing. But you're right, David. It's not something that takes off in the form of what a smart board will do. Here's my argument to it, though. You look at things like the iPad. You look at things like point of sale devices, those kinds of things, and every bit of that is moving more and more toward the touch interaction. And I think what we need to be teaching kids is not necessarily, here's how you use a smart board, right? Smart board, that's one tool. It's like saying, here's how you use an iPhone. Well, look, in 10 years, iPhone's going to look really different. In 10 years, the smart board's going to look really different. What we need to be training our students to do is be flexible when it comes to technology, is understanding that technology is going to change every year, and you got to be ready for what's coming. So I think learning how to interact with technology on a touch basis has been one of the best skills our kids can learn, whether or not they use an actual smartboard in a business at some point or not. It almost becomes a moot point.
What led to the decision to go with the Google backend? There are several options here for schools to choose, and maybe that was sort of at the district level. But what are some of at the very least, what are some of the pros and cons you've discovered living in that ecosystem?
Well, I will tell you, I think that it goes to a cost. I mean, I don't know exactly what Apple's solutions are for backing up, emails for a district, but I'll tell you, Google is really, from what I see from talking to superintendents to doing some of the grad school work that I'm doing, you just can't find anything that's a better price than Google that's out there. You're essentially getting what amounts to a free service that is just incredible. You do pay some when you get to the size of a school district, but it is, I can remember the days when we were using Lotus Notes, and to go from Lotus Notes to Gmail was just a gigantic leap in time. But in terms of Google versus Apple Classroom, I think what happens is people are used to the having a Gmail. You look at the amount of folks and the emails that they're using. There's just so many people use Google's products that to make that transition is great. Not only that, but when we're talking about the work that we do in a school system, it is a document heavy business, and so for us, we have just thousands of documents that are used district wide, and so to use something that is so reliable on the collaboration piece, I personally I think. I think Pages outdoes every word processor that's out there. There's nothing else that looks as beautiful as a Pages document. Nobody competes, but there's also nothing that competes with Google's ability to run collaboration on such a grand scale. I mean, to talk about no lag whatsoever, seeing live updates, those are huge pieces. And then you have a folder structure that very much mimics a folder structure that people are very much used to. So when you got people who, technology is maybe not their best subject there, when you can talk about folder structures, they're used to folder structures. And that's the way Google is built. It's built with that common language, and you can have that conversation even with teachers who are maybe a little bit reluctant on that. So that's my theory anyway.
I mean, I'm not in the education field, but it seems from the outside to me like Google has just been eating Apple's lunch as of the last few years.
Yeah, I don't even think Apple's really they're compared to what Google's doing. I mean, they're a competitor for sure, but they're just not holding the market share. And really, what happens is when you approach a school board, and I think some of this comes back from who sits on a school board. Generally speaking, you have I don't know if every district is this way, but most North Carolina districts are this way. You can't be a teacher or a principal or a school employee and also sit on the school board. So often what happens is the school board is made up of individuals who are retired. They may actively have a job now, but it's not a job that they have some time, I guess, because it's a pretty demanding responsibility. So they're not used to hanging out with some of the latest and greatest technology. So when you bring something like Google, which is intuitive, it just makes sense. They're ready to sign on, and so you look at making a decision that large, that becomes a big deal for school boards and for your technology staff. We have a pretty extensive IT staff in our district that does a lot of work, and so Google gives them a ton of tools on the administrative side to be able to pull things like my email is public record. So if I ever have to deal with some kind of litigation, then our IT staff can just grab my emails from this date to this date, and there it is. It's just that simple. So I just think the tools that they give educators they're just far more intuitive, and they've just done a better job, hands down.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. Make your next move with Squarespace. Enter offer code MPU at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. Why don't you make your next move with Squarespace? I sure have. I've set up my legal website, MacSparky, all through Squarespace, and it's been so much easier since I did that. As much as I like the internet, I don't want to be in the website building business. Squarespace handles that for me. With Squarespace, you can create an online store, portfolio, blog. They have an all-in-one platform that lets you do whatever you need on the internet. There's nothing to install, no patches to worry about, no upgrades needed. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Squarespace has got it all covered, and they have award-winning 24/7 customer support if you need any help. They let you quickly and easily grab a unique domain name, and all of those award-winning templates are beautifully designed for you to show off your great ideas. The reason I went to Squarespace was because the service I was using before required way too much effort by me. Without even realizing it, I had broken plugins and vulnerabilities on my website that was going to take me a lot of time to sort out. So instead, I just switched to Squarespace and I let them take care of all of those problems for me. I've never looked back. Squarespace plans start at just $12 a month, but you can start a trial with no credit card required by going to squarespace.com/MPU. And when you decide to sign up, use the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain and to show your support for the Mac Power users. Once again, that's squarespace.com/MPU and the code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase. We thank Squarespace for their support of this show and all of Relay FM. Squarespace, make your next move, make your next website. Jake, one thing we haven't talked about is that while you're doing all this, you're also, by your own words, a full-time student. How do you hold all that together?
Well, I have learned to live by a schedule. So a couple of things have come into play for me. One is a pretty let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm pretty strict on myself when it comes to my weekly review. So that is, I've been a devotee to the GTD methodology now for a good 6-7 years. I like to tell people the only other book that changed my life more than getting things done was the Bible. So it's for me, it's a pretty big deal to make sure I hit that weekly review every week. I don't hit it. I'd say in a month's time or in a 6 months time, I'm hitting it. I may be missing 2 or 3 Fridays. I do my weekly review on a Friday afternoon after all the teachers have left, which is generally right after school. Friday is one of those days where you don't have a lot of teachers staying late. So I like to stay late. The building gets really quiet, and I put on a pair of headphones or my AirPods, and I get to work. So I listen to a little bit of just some tunes. I try to pick some stuff that I don't even really know the words, so I don't pay attention to it, and I get right to work. So I have a weekly review checklist that actually is a shortcut for me. And so I run through that weekly review, which basically takes me through. I have a couple of ways I can do it. I've been experimenting with doing a literal checklist in GoodNotes, and that works pretty good. And then I have, if I'm feeling, like I want to do an OmniFocus version, I've got task paper, basically that I've created. Put that in as a text input in shortcuts, and then it creates a draft for me in task paper, and then it runs an automatic action, which is task paper to OF created by the Rosemary Orchard, and then that goes into OmniFocus, and I run through the checklist from there. So that review is really important. I go through some of the standards that's in that GT methodology, and I've customized that for me to run through some principle specific things. But I also run through where I'm at, where I stand with grad school. I take a look at those projects. I take a look at my home projects. All that kind of stuff. And that all gets reviewed every week. And I clean all that up to make sure that I'm ready for the next morning, because the next morning is when the magic happens. So every Saturday morning, and I think, David, you and I chatted about this, the next morning involves a 4 a.m. rise and a trip to, right now it's between Waffle House and there's a Denny's near my house that I like to go to as well. So uh, while this sounds really crazy, and I agree, it very much is. With a 14-month-old, a 15-year-old, a wife whom I love very much, it is very hard to get a lot of work done at home, especially when the kids are up, when my wife's doing things, and I want to be with my family. So I found that my family does not like to get up before about 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I am a morning person, so I rise about 4 a.m. and I head out to a good breakfast spot, and I put on the headphones and I get right to work with grad school. I only work on grad school on that Saturday morning, and what that allows me to do is get about 4 to 5 hours of solid grad school work. And you hear a lot about getting into flow states and things like that. And I get into a flow state about once a week when it comes to grad school. And I just, I've already done my weekly review, so I know exactly the tasks that I need to do. I know exactly how much writing I need to get done. I've got textbooks with me. Oftentimes those are on my iPad, and I am just banging out some papers. And I might write 30, 40 pages, sitting in one sitting, where I'm just constantly going at it, and, doing research and things like that. So, um, it's kind of funny how I've landed on Denny's or Waffle House, because I've had this sort of spirit quest of finding the perfect place, which for me involves three very, very important things. Number one is Wi-Fi. I cannot do my work without Wi-Fi. So my local Waffle House does have okay Wi-Fi. It works out okay. But the other two things are really good coffee and pretty good breakfast. So my wife and I were big coffee nerds. We like to really get into the specifics around coffee. And so I need some decent coffee. I need good breakfast food, and I need good Wi-Fi. Well, the two places that have that anywhere near me is Denny's. I don't know if that's a national chain or if it's a local thing.
Yeah, it's national.
And okay, gotcha. And Waffle House, and I'm pretty sure that one's national too. So the Waffle House, they both have good breakfast, pretty good coffee, and Wi-Fi. So I sit there for a good 5 hours with my headphones in. They probably think I'm nuts over there, and I get a lot of work done. So that has been my workflow now for a good year and a half. It has worked really, really well, and I will probably continue doing that until I have achieved my doctorate, and then I might too sleep till 9 a.m. one Saturday morning. Who knows?
You need to at least once.
It's
Well,
just one time.
a couple of things you talked about. The first was the idea of creating your weekly review list with a shortcut script, or you could do this on the Mac with Keyboard Maestro. But I think that's something that people overlook. One-time lists, whether using reminders or OmniFocus, and I believe Things has support for this as well. Rather than keeping those resident in your task manager, just creating them on demand is a power tip that I think a lot of people never think about. But once you get some automation chops, it's trivial to make those. So that's something I think you do that's really useful. And then straying into focus territory, to me, one of the biggest game changers for me ever was when I learned to plan my tasks the night before and do them in the morning. There is something to be said for just waking up and starting. For me, that's gold.
Yeah, the fact that I can get out of my house in about 15 minutes, I can go from asleep to driving in 15 minutes, and not having to worry about, okay, do I have the things? Do I have all the stuff? All that stuff gets packed the night before, down to I lay out my clothes, shower the night before. So when the alarm goes off, it's a steady, I'm dressed and ready to go. I'm in my truck, and I'm headed down the road in 10 to 15 minutes. And by the time that I get there, I'm fully awake, and I open up my computer, and, I've only got the only apps that are open are, maybe Chrome and OmniFocus. And I know exactly what I'm doing. I couldn't agree with you more, David, having that planned out the day before. If I rolled into, Waffle House at 4:15 in the morning with not a planned task, man, the best thing about that morning is going to be the waffles. That's for sure.
The So in terms of getting that work done, are you on the MacBook or are you on the iPad at that point?
Generally, if I'm doing heavy duty writing, I'm on the MacBook, and the reason for that is I'm generally switching between. I do a lot of my writing either in Ulysses or in a Google document. So Google has come a long way in terms of being able to do headings. the right way. I have to write because I'm in graduate school for an education field. We write in MLA, and that's our standard keeping citations and all that kind of stuff. So that's there's a certain way it has to be headed, and a certain way you do your resources, your cites, citations at the end, and all that kind of stuff. So what I've developed is a Google document that is basically a template. So I don't ever write in this template, but I've created the standard headings. I've created the spacing on the cover page, the running headers, all the page numbers, everything is already created. So when I go to start a new essay, a new paper for graduate school, I basically create a copy of this, and then I run through and I create the outline for that, and I go from there. So that has been kind of a way to get into a topic pretty quickly, and so I match that up with a little bit of brainstorming. I'm a big MindNode fan, and so I generally start with a MindNode. But once I've got my plan down, then I jump right over to that Google document and I start writing pretty heavily. So yeah, it works out pretty well.
Yeah, I use on a couple of my collaborative projects, I use Quip instead of Google Docs and Google Sheets, and it is much better on iOS. I mean, it's a smaller company, and I know there's other reasons not to want to use it for some people, but if you do a lot of iOS based stuff, I find Quip far superior. But who knows?
I'll definitely have to look into that one.
Maybe they'll turn a new leaf. Well, if your school's on Google Docs, you're out of luck already.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's very true.
Secretly copying and pasting from Quip to Google Docs when no one's looking.
Yeah, it's not the solution.
Don't do that. You don't want to lead a double life.
You're right. It is frustrating with that, but I'll tell you, that's I have done some of that with even with things like Ulysses. There's something about if I just really do want to get away from my computer, get into one single app, and do some heavy duty writing. Just focus really on the writing and leave everything else behind. Ulysses has become a great tool for that because I can still do my headings. In fact, there was not too long ago I discovered what is the I'm not sure what it's called, but there's like a gallery of certain templates with Ulysses. I can't remember what this is called, but you can they have these templates basically where you can write with headings, and it'll turn those headings into the right. I think I said MLA to begin, but it's APA. So I think I said that wrong. But anyway, it turns those headings into an APA standard, and so you can basically write an entire APA document right in Ulysses, and when you hit that export button to go to the PDF version, it will translate that entire document into a correctly formatted, or for the most part, correctly formatted APA document. So then you can just copy that stuff, paste it into either a Word document or a Google document, and you sort of got the whole thing. But there's something beautiful about the simplicity of writing in an app like Ulysses, and even getting a lot of writing out. So I like that app. It's a good one.
Have you played with the idea of putting separate sections or things in different buckets of text in Ulysses and then moving them around to see do you ever do any of that stuff?
I don't, although it would not be a far stretch from what I do now, because I've learned that as I write the Google Docs version of this is that whole outline stuff. The left-hand side of a Google document, you've got the outline, and that allows you to jump to different sections. Now, I say that to say, the biggest paper I've written so far, which is nothing to shake a stick at, it's about 80 pages. And that's no trivial thing, but I do have this dissertation coming up in a couple of years, and I have a feeling that that's going to be even more of a document to where I'm going to have to live sort of as you put it, in different buckets. There are different sections, and in those sections, it's pretty strict on what you can write and what you can't write, and you got to include this in here and that and there, and so living in that kind of world, there's a lot to be said about keeping very isolated sections until you get toward that final product. Then you can take everything and put it into one document.
And when I wrote iPad at work and Mac at work for Wiley all those years ago, each one was about 120,000 words. So it was a lot of words, and I did it in Scrivener at the time, but it's the same principle where you have these buckets of text, and I wrote them kind of inside out. Started in the middle and kind of wrote my way to the edges because I knew
Sure.
the meat of the content, but I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to start things and end things. And having that ability to just grab whole sections and move them around is powerful. And the other thing that's powerful about that is both Ulysses and Scrivener have ways of reporting to you, which ones have text in them, how much text they have in them. So you can be finishing off your waffles for the day and say, okay, what bucket do I fill today? And it's just a great way to just make progress every time you sit down.
I think that's a good spot to wind it down.
Well, Jake, we've gone too long, but couldn't help myself. There's still stuff in the outline. We appreciate you coming in. Anywhere people could go to find you, Jake, if they want to get in touch.
Yeah, sure. I am I'm an active observer on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Jake_E_Wilson. And so I, spent a little bit of time over there, especially looking around. Happy to connect with folks there. In terms of, business stuff and consulting stuff, my website is jakewilson.solutions. I love that we can have these custom URLs these days. And
that's really good.
Actually, I got so excited when I could buy jakewilson.ninja. So I do own that one. That one's one of my favorites. I haven't done anything with it, but I do, I have the URL, so snag that one up. But yeah, jakewilson.solutions is, it's a website that I designed using Squarespace, and it's a good place to connect up with me. And then, those two are probably the best way to jump out there. Twitter and my website is probably the quickest way to get in touch with me. So.
I think for your ninja site, you should just have a picture just of your face covered in a ninja mask so we can just see your eyes. That's all.
I like it.
No links, no text, just that. Well, we all appreciate everything you're doing. I mean, you're really carrying the torch in education for technology, and of course, we appreciate that. And any principal that's using shortcuts to get his work done every day is one of my favorite principles. I'm just going to say that, And if you are also involved in education, this would be a great show to kind of step in the forums and let us know what you're doing and talk about that in the comments to this show. I'm always interested to hear about this stuff. And thank you so much, Jay. Thank you so much, Jake, for coming into the show today. Thank you to our sponsors, 1Password, Omni, Squarespace, and Linode. And we will see you all next week.
Thanks so much.